Gentlewoman yields back. Ms. Lee is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to focus on the subject of the Inspector General process. And as we know, the Inspector General reviews the processes and procedures of the Capitol Police from time to time, makes recommendations on areas where we might need to see improvement, and then, of course, we track, and you all, as a board, track implementation of that improvement. And I'd like to talk a little bit more detail about how that happens and the status of some of those improvements. Last week, we had Inspector General Ron Russo testify in front of our Oversight Subcommittee in the House Administration Committee. And he shared with us that some of the Inspector General's recommendations had been designated as closed, even though there had been some internal modification to what exactly was changed or improved or implemented. We have heard and have been tracking closely in this committee the progress of those changes, implementation of the Inspector General's recommendations, and of course, our shared interest in ensuring that we are equipping and implementing the best practices that we can identify for our Capitol Police. So Inspector General Russo stated that some of these recommendations may have been essentially marked and reported as completed because they were moving in the right direction and they met the spirit of the recommendation. In essence, the recommendation itself, the thing that needed to be fixed or was recommended to be fixed, had been altered in some way, but nonetheless marked as closed. And while we certainly appreciate the Capitol Police Inspector General bringing this to our attention, we want to be sure that we understand a little bit more about those modifications and that process. So, General Gibson, I'd like to start with you. Are you familiar with these Inspector General reports and the recommendations in them?
Yes, we are familiar with the IG's reports as he publishes them and the recommendations. I would say the IG's decision as to whether or not to close a recommendation and whether or not it's because it was fully met or a compensatory control has been applied is his decision, not the board's decision or the chief's decision.
Where a modification of any type is made, is that indicated, is that reported back to the board as something that was changed or modified?
So this is something that Mr. McFarland mentioned previously, where we have recently become aware that Mr. Russo, like his predecessor, has applied at times compensatory controls. And Mr. Russo has made a commitment to keep us informed when this occurs. We have quarterly updates at formal board meetings with the IG, and that's an ideal forum for us to discuss that and better understand his rationale, particularly in those places where he has applied some kind of compensatory control in his decision to close that.
Are you concerned, with his commitment to continue to keep you all informed in mind, are you concerned about the concept of compensatory controls and deviations from the actual recommendations that are made by the Inspector General?
So I think the concept of compensatory controls is not in itself disturbing. It is a practice that is applied by other IGs at times. I am not yet concerned about the compensatory controls that Mr. Russo may have applied in his decisions to close them, but certainly it's something that we'll want to continue to look at in our shared interest in that aspect of oversight.
And as part of your oversight role, will you all be making an assessment, an independent assessment essentially, of whether you think any modification, any compensatory control is still done in a way that truly does meet that objective, the objective of the recommendation in the first place?
So it's a hypothetical, but certainly our IG working group that is working closely to dig into the details of those reports, I would expect them to bring that to our attention should they find such an instance.
All right. And Chief Manger, anything that you would add on this subject and how you view this from an operational perspective?
So we very carefully document our actions, the IG's response to our actions, and it is logged in and it is available to this committee, to the board, and it gives specific detail about what actions we've taken. So if I want to say for the record that we are not We're not changing the target. I mean, we are complying with the recommendation, and it's solely the IG's decision whether to close it or not.
Thank
But
you.
it's all documented.
Right. Thank you, Chief. Mr. Chairman,